Hypertension. This is Jack Brook from Columbia Gorge Community College. In this session, what I'd like to look at is high blood pressure or hypertension. I'd like to discuss the parameters of hypertension and how it relates to disease and increased risk of health-related problems. By definition, as you can see, hypertension is basically high blood pressure that stays around for a long time. There are different degrees of hypertension, and one of the newer diagnoses is prehypertension. You didn't used to hear that in the past, but this is kind of a mechanism, a preventative tool that helps physicians to prevent someone from getting hypertension if they can catch it early. There's a lot that they can do to stop the trend of as you age and so forth, the blood pressure going up and then resulting in some of the healthcare problems. So you know the normal blood pressure, but I just listed here some of the parameters that are used. And you may not ever hear about stage 1 hypertension or stage 2 hypertension, but a physician would be well aware of those. So those are the parameters we're working with. And so let's go on and discuss a little bit more. Looking at some of the background or prevalence of high blood pressure coming from, again, the CDC or Center for Disease Control, you can see that 1/3 of individuals within this country have been diagnosed as having hypertension, and there are another third that don't even know they have it because they have not had it checked and they don't know. Looking at Oregon specifically, it's a little bit lower than national average, but still high and growing, because back in 2005 or so, 2002 I think was the last data I saw, it was 23%. So it's gone up 3% in about 7 years. And then 25% of adults have prehypertension. So if you add those up, you've got over half the population, having either prehypertension or hypertension. They've been diagnosed with that, and there's another third that don't even know. So a lot of individuals in this country are prone to hypertension. And then as you grow older, 90% have hypertension for different reasons. Just looking at some maps from CDC, you can see this was from the 2000 and the data from 2000, and you can see back down in the south, 28% was the highest amount, and then if you look at Oregon, it was around 23% or so. But if we go to the 2007 data, you can see that now those same states are up in the 29 to 33% range, and Oregon is in the 26 to 27% range. So even with that, in 7 years, it's gone up quite a bit. So it is a growing problem. There is a trend of higher and higher blood pressure for reasons that we'll discuss as we go through. As far as costs, $76.6 billion per year dealing with healthcare costs, according to the CDC. And then if we look at Oregon specifically, about $600 million. So that's a lot of money dealing with one situation. There are two types of hypertension. Most hypertension that you hear about or your physician would talk to you about is essential hypertension. This is hypertension that really can't be pinpointed or nailed down to a specific cause, and we'll talk about why and look at some of those in a second. So when you go to the physician and they diagnose you as having high blood pressure, hypertension, it's normally essential hypertension unless you have a specific disease that is known to cause hypertension, and that would be secondary hypertension. So it would be a symptom of some kind of a kidney problem or something like that. If you know you do indeed have a kidney problem, or if you have some other issue. The problem with hypertension is there's really no symptoms. There's really It's known as the silent killer, and most people would never know that they have hypertension. And so the only way you can really determine hypertension is if you get your blood pressure checked. And there's a lot of people who do not go to physicians very often, if at all, and they would never know that they have high blood pressure. There are some individuals who say they can tell. They say, well, I know my blood pressure goes up because I get headaches or my nose bleeds, but these are kind of temporary things. It's not a long-term thing like you would be diagnosed with hypertension where you have it on a continual basis. So it's the silent killer. You have to go get it checked. There's only one way to do it, and that's to have your blood pressure taken. There are some factors. This is the essential hypertension again we're looking at. There are multiple factors, and I've just listed a few. So these would be if you go into the physician and the physician comes back and says you have hypertension, have high blood pressure, and you ask why, you might have found out if you've been diagnosed with that, or if you ever do, you might find out they say, we're not sure. We're just going to have to try some things and see what works. Because as you can see, there's several things that can cause that. Ultimate issue would be you might have kidney problems or renal dysfunction. As you grow older, your blood pressure tends to go up. So the key would be to get it checked early in life and get it in control before it gets worse as you get older. The African people of African descent tend to have higher blood pressures. If you have a history in your family, your genetics of high blood pressure, then you have a tendency for that. Lack of physical inactivity, especially aerobic exercise, can lead to hypertension. Stress at work or in your everyday life can cause increased heart rate and things that could increase your blood pressure. Smoking, diabetes, you might want to get checked for that. That might be included in that category of secondary hypertension. But if you don't know you're diabetic, then there's a potential there too. But there are other things besides these. So again, essential hypertension, you really don't know. There's lots of possibilities. As far as how does nutrition fit into this, you've heard a lot about sodium, but in reality, it only affects maybe 25% of our population, those who are considered sodium sensitive. Sodium sensitivity has to do with how we get rid of sodium from our blood through the kidneys. There are some individuals who have a very difficult time reducing sodium levels in their blood. And what happens is that sodium in your blood will attract water molecules. Some of you that have taken biology and understand a concentration gradient and understand osmosis, understand the idea of the attraction of sodium ions to water molecules that are polar. And so when you have high sodium in the blood and you can't get rid of it, water molecules tend to accumulate around the sodium ion. And what that does is increases blood volume, which increases pressure on the blood vessels because you have more volume of blood in the same amount of space. And so that increases pressure, which would lead to high blood pressure and hypertension. But as I mentioned, the information that I've read indicates that only about 25% of our population has a problem with sodium sensitivity. But it's one of the first things that a physician will ask you to do if you have high blood pressure is lower your sodium, because it's a very easy thing to do. It doesn't require medication, that kind of thing. So it's one thing that you have to really be sensitive about in looking at hidden sodium and sodium. Sodium is in other things other than salt, and so we'll talk more about that later. Obesity, for every pound of fat, you need about another mile of capillaries, or the small blood vessels. So therefore, you increase the rate of the heart in order to how hard it has to pump, and so that can increase problems with hypertension. There is some data out there that low calcium levels, magnesium, potassium, can relate to hypertension. So this would take a lab test in order to see if that was an issue. And then alcohol can be a problem, as it's a vasoconstrictor, and so it may cause your blood vessels not to be open as much, and kind of thing. As far as treatment, there are drugs out there that you can take, and so diuretics would be pills that you would take that cause you to release more water volume. And so the idea is you're going to reduce blood volume. And when you reduce blood volume, then you're going to reduce the pressure on those blood vessels. And that will help to your blood pressure. Adrenergic inhibitors, if it's a stress-related problem, you can reduce the amount of stress, related to how your nervous system works and things. Vasodilators will basically open up your blood vessels, so allow more space for that amount of blood volume. So there's some possibilities there, but we're more interested in nutritional treatment and preventative means. So if we look at diet-related issues, if you are overweight, obese, or at least 10 pounds overweight, there is some data out there that you can see an improvement in blood pressure if you lose 10 pounds. It takes about 10 pounds of weight loss in order to see any kind of a difference in your blood pressure. So if you're several pounds overweight, for every 10 pounds you should see a significant improvement in your blood pressure. Unless, again, it's another problem with renal function or something like that, then that would be another issue. But if it's kind of common everyday hypertension and there's no real physical issues going on, then that weight loss will help a lot. Alcoholic restriction, trying to make sure you keep those blood vessels open, less than 1 ounce a day, which basically would be tantamount to about 12 ounces of beer, about 4 ounces of wine, and 1 ounce of hard liquor, kind of thing. And then there's some evidence that increasing potassium can help. And potassium foods, you might want to get on the web and just look up high potassium foods. But you've heard a lot about bananas, but actually potatoes have more. So I would recommend getting on the web or going someplace to look at what foods are high in potassium. I'd be very careful with supplements because you can get too much potassium, hyperkalemia, which can cause your heart to palpitate and cause some other physical issues. So there is a case where you can get too much potassium, so you have to be very careful. And I would work with my physician if I were you and make sure you let them know, and they can help you, or a dietitian, and they can help you with your potassium levels. As far as sodium is concerned, because that's kind of one of the high points that nutrition looks at, the general population, the goal is about 2,300. Again, these come from the CDC. But if you're in a high risk group, again, greater than 40 years, African American, high blood pressure already, then the goal is 1,500 milligrams. So you want to get that down. As you can see on the right, the graphic just shows that actually most of the sodium that we get in our food comes from outside the home. Processed meats and processed foods and canned foods that have preservatives in there, like sodium benzoate. And sodium is kind of a carrier for a lot of additives that you'd find in foods because it makes it soluble in water. So they use sodium to do that. It makes it mix into the food better. But also things like monosodium glutamate that they add to enhance the flavor of foods and that kind of thing. And sodium nitrates and sodium nitrites, and a lot of sodium that we would call hidden sodium in foods, as well as salt. So if you want to reduce your sodium, if you have to go out, you can't stay at home, you don't want to cook kind of thing, I would highly recommend, picking a restaurant. They should be able to provide you with nutrition information about the foods that they prepare, and you can get the sodium levels of the foods and then make correct choices to reduce the amount of sodium you eat. Or if you just have a particular food that you like, again, reducing the serving size might be an option, because you want to be able to stay on a low sodium plan, and so you want to be able to eat what you enjoy. So you may have to just reduce the serving sizes and to reduce that sodium level. But obviously home cooking, so you know how much sodium you're putting into foods, is the preferable option, and just watching how much sodium you put. There are salt substitutes. Regular salt is sodium chloride. You can get potassium chloride, which is either salt substitute or fake salt kind of thing. It doesn't, it has that salty flavor to it, but it's not the same. It's a little metallic and it doesn't taste quite, but it's better than plain. Let's just put it that way. So you can do that. And there are some things on the market that you can buy that would substitute for salt. So you might want to try those, a little bit more of different kinds of spices instead of adding salt to your food. But sodium, again, only deals with people who are sodium sensitive, really. But even if you're not sodium sensitive, if you eat a lot of sodium, it's going to make a difference. So you have to be careful with that. But so when you go into the physician and they diagnose you with high blood pressure, probably some of the main things they're going to discuss with you is reduce your sodium, lose some weight, get some aerobic exercise. Those are going to be the keys that you'll hear. So if we look at prevention, again, you're going to eat a healthy diet, and if you don't know what a healthy diet is, I would suggest going to a dietitian or someone who is a professional who can help you with making choices for a healthy diet, high in plant foods and low in sodium, that kind of thing. Healthy weight, again, trying to reduce, for every 10 pounds, you're going to see that difference. So reducing that down, increasing your physical activity, your mainly aerobic exercise, up to 30 minutes a day. The preferred would be more than that, but at least 30 minutes a day. Getting that heart rate up between your target heart rates and being aerobic. Don't smoke and reduce your alcohol use. So these are the preventative mechanisms for hypertension. It is a growing problem. It is causing an increase of strokes and heart problems, and there are other issues with blood vessels that can appear. So we need to do better in reducing our blood pressure, but the first thing would be to go get it checked. And even if you're in your 20s, I would recommend, starting getting it checked. If it's fine, you may not have to go back for another year, but just make sure, because if you get into that pre-hypertension area, it's just going to get worse. And so don't feel comfortable that I don't have high blood pressure, so I'm never going to go back again, because I don't have a problem with that. Because as you age, it will change, and as your life changes and the way you eat changes, so you have to be very careful. And we can reduce a lot of problems by reducing our blood pressure. All right.